Welcome to Conversations with Kay. I'm Kay Ryder. And every week I talk with Vermonters who are leaders in the fields of government, healthcare, education, the arts, and community life. And welcome to our radio listeners. 99.3 FM, WBVT LP. Our guest is Meg Smith, and she's the director of the Vermont Womens Fund. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, now, when and why was the Vermont Womens Fund started, Meg?
The Vermont Womens Fund was started in 1994 as the first philanthropic resource in the state of Vermont to focus primarily on the needs of women and children. And this came about by a group of women in Vermont who were, I would say, frustrated and unhappy with how services were being determined and rendered and financed for that affected women and girls, and in fact felt they were being overlooked. So there was a wave of women's funds happening across the country at this time, and this idea of creating your own fund and being able to distribute your own money really appealed to our founders, and they took it upon themselves to create an organization to then fundraise for that and then distribute those funds in the form of grants.
Marvelous, marvelous.
Absolutely.
I applaud it. How long have you been director of the Vermont Women's Fund, Meg?
I've been director for over 6 years.
Okay. How are you funded, actually? How is the fund funded?
Well, we are a component fund of the Vermont Community Foundation. And the Vermont Community Foundation is our 501c3. We are a fund of that. We're part of a family of funds. But when the Women's Fund was formed and started, it was funded by individual donations from people, mostly women, across the state and out of state, and that continues today. We get private donations and some family foundation funds.
Okay. I know that the Women's Fund gives out grants to help women achieve. That's what you're after. Mm-hmm. Approximately how many dollars have you raised to help women since you were founded 25 years ago? 25
years ago. Over $2 million has been distributed in the form of grants around the state. So our grants go to nonprofit organizations. You have to be a 501c3, so we don't give individual scholarships or money to individuals. But we support programs that support women and girls, and they have to be gender specific. So if there is a nonprofit that has a program that serves, let's say, girls and boys, that program has to show that they have a component within their program that focuses solely on girls. So we don't exclude boys and men, but our focus is on the betterment of women and girls. So $2 million has been distributed in our lifetime, and we have almost $3 million in our endowment.
That's very good. I'm talking with Meg Smith, and she's the director of the Vermont Women's Fund. Well, that sounds wonderful. $2 million. And now, like for instance, you don't ignore the boy. Like for instance, in the Boys and Girls Club of Burlington, if they had a program specifically for girls, that would be what you would fund.
Correct.
Right. Well, that makes sense to me. Tell us about the focus of your current grants for women. Okay. What are you looking at right now, Meg?
In the last 5 years, actually, since I started, the Women's Fund, let me just back up and say it's run by a council, which is like a board. And the council 6 or 7 years ago took a long, hard look at what their mission was, and they decided they really wanted to focus on the economic betterment of women, economic self-sufficiency and independency. And that includes financial literacy, job skill development, and finding viable pathways to good careers. So we really focus on economic development for women. And that ranges from programs that help the very neediest of women who are just still trying to get a high school diploma and need housing help and usually have dependent children or a child. But a high school diploma is the first step towards some kind of economic independence. Can't get a job without that.
When we say economic literacy, we really mean how to handle money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big word for it, but understanding how money works and how you can budget and things like that, right?
How to handle it and how to earn it.
Yep.
And then what to do with it once you've earned it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm interested in, you can help women get their high school equivalency, for instance, and job training.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to go to college, right?
Correct. No, that is one of the things that a lot of studies have shown now that, in fact, in Vermont we have a lot of students that graduate from high school, and do not go on to the next step of their education. And they go into the job market, usually at low-paying jobs, because they don't have that college degree. And one of the programs that we have focused on over the years is teaching women the non-traditional skills, the construction trades, electrical, plumbing, where you can start out at a really good hourly wage. And so that's an avenue that had not been explored before, but there are a couple of organizations, Vermont Works for Women, which is based in Burlington and has a statewide presence. They were founded specifically to help women learn those non-traditional skills.
Now we know that women can do this. I remember Rosie the Riveter in World War II. I mean, I was a kid, but I remember these big posters of Rosie the Riveter, and her hat on and doing all this work, and there's no doubt about it. Women did these things.
Yeah. And in fact, Vermont Works for Women started a program for middle school girls called Rosie's Girls, based on teaching girls some of those skills at a really early age. So learning to weld, auto repair,
changing a flat tire,
how to fix a mountain bike. All those skills are invaluable in life, and teaching girls in middle school how to do that helps them think a little bit differently about what kind of job career they may have in the future. And in the sort of current version of that, today's skill that really is a stepping stone and an entry point to a higher wage is coding. And learning to code, which is part of how you learn how to develop software, that is a skill that we in fact have funded several coding camps for girls to teach them that. So that starts in middle school up through high school.
Well, that's marvelous. Why do you think that there has been a lack of money specifically geared towards young women to learn these skills? Why do you think that has happened?
Well, I think that was an historical construct that started a long, long time ago. That it wasn't considered a woman's job necessarily to be making money outside of the home. I mean, we're talking what I'd say is now ancient history. Before the 70s and the first wave of feminism, and even the 20s and suffragettes, but that women, the idea of educating women to be economically self-sufficient was not in the sort of social construct. If women were supposed to have children, get married, have children, raise a family. So, and oftentimes, even if they were working while they were raising their families and stuff, that work was not considered important. It was just to make a little money. I think everyone would agree that today's world, we look at careers and economic independence a little differently now. But, it takes time. Culture change takes time, and there are vestiges of that old thinking alive and well today, but slowly, that's turning.
Yeah. We need to look at brain power, don't we?
Absolutely. And brains are, I mean, women's brains and men's brains are different, but women's brains are not only just as strong, but they have great strengths in the marketplace.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research that shows that women at the head of companies tend to have a better return on investment, more profitable, because women are excellent managers and they can collaborate and move teams of people together more efficiently than men in a lot of cases.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, that's really true.
Yeah.
And you know, I look at my own life, and I mean, obviously I worked, but you know, women tend to have more friends than men. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I think
I
that
mean, men
social
have,
circles are wider.
Yeah, the social circle seems to be wider, and women seem to keep hold of their friends. I mean, I have friends from college,
Right.
even from high school, and I mean, you know, and my daughters are the same. Now, my son, who is extremely social, I think he learned, you know, he just happened to be a bunch of guys, and they were really social, and he keeps track of his friends, which
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, you might get a lot of men who hear you say that and disagree, but, you know, social networks tend to be very strong among women. But, you know, there's just a multitude of skills that help an individual be a strong leader, an effective leader. And oftentimes communication is so important. Women tend to be better communicators. You know, it ranges from a very individual thing to when you look at the research and you're talking about, you know, a national trend. But when you look at the research about women in leadership positions, they do very, very well. And the companies that they lead do very well.
Right, and we need to get over this hump. What kind of jobs can women do?
Yeah.
We really do.
I think we're really close to getting over it.
I hope so. I hope so. Can you tell us a little bit, change the story, advancing women? Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, a personalized concept of this, how it works out there for a woman?
And you talk about, when you're talking about change the story, you're talking about the initiative that we fund.
Yep.
Okay, and then how it affects individual women.
Right.
Change the Story is an initiative. It's like a campaign. It's not its own nonprofit or anything. It was the idea that Tiff Bloomley, who is a leader in our community, came to the Women's Fund and wanted to advance and escalate the change that was happening in the workplace and help women achieve more and to create culture change within our workplace in a broader way. And it started, so Tiff came to the Women's Fund, to the Vermont Commission on Women, and to Vermont Works for Women. Those are three separate organizations. Came to three of us and said, how about if you guys get together and help move this initiative forward? So we all thought it was a great idea. And what was really unique about it was combining the Vermont Commission on Women, which is a policy and advocacy organization, Vermont Works for Women, which is like a program provider, a nonprofit, and the Vermont Women's Fund, which is philanthropy. So it was policy, program, and philanthropy all coming together to work towards the same aim. And I think that's why it's been so successful. So that's the background of what Change the Story was about. Yeah. I think you were asking about how we change.
I can see if you change the story, if women can get better jobs when they're young, when they retire, they get more Social Security.
Exactly.
It's a long spectrum, but it works.
Yeah. And right now, women aging out in the workforce are facing, our state is going to face a lot of problems because a lot of women who are at senior age don't have the benefits of Social Security because they weren't in the workforce that long, and they are going to fall into the poverty ranks much faster than younger women who will have had a longer career trajectory. So that's a worry, and that's something we have to be
Absolutely.
prepared for.
We have an aging population.
Yeah.
Look at my gray hair. We have an aging population, and they're going to
Yeah.
need long-term care.
Yeah.
And
And
some of them
services.
don't have a lot of Social Security.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah, it
And we
really
need more
is.
young people in our state.
Yeah, that's
But in addition, well, I'm talking
Yeah.
with Meg Smith, who's the director of the Vermont Women's Fund. Now, in addition to awarding grants,
Mm-hmm.
the Vermont Women's Fund, one of your first goals really was to encourage women to become philanthropists,
yeah.
and especially to help other women. Why is it important for women, especially, become philanthropists and know that they can do this?
Back to sort of traditional paradigm, women did not control money in our society. It was always the purview of men. And in a traditional marriage, it was the man who had the control of money, and women were in control of spending it, but on their household.
In the household.
Exactly. And fast forward to the 70s, 80s, 90s, where women started to realize that financial control, I mean, money is power. And if you have some control over money, you can then effectuate change. And that's really the basis for the Women's Fund, was to educate and enlighten women that here's a fund that you can raise money for, you can help control and distribute where you think that should go. And that was an education in and of itself. And for women across the state, one of the beautiful things about the Women's Fund when it started was it started with donations of, $5. $5 to to 50,000, but there were many more $5 donors, and still are, than very large-scale donors. I mean, and it was a study in empowerment, so that this fund was raised really to help women and girls. No one had been paying attention to those needs. I mean, a lot has changed even since the fund started 25 years ago in terms of people understanding that there are hurdles that women and girls have had to face that men don't. So the fund is symbolic of that kind of financial control and power and empowerment, which I think is really positive and really strong. And today we have a lot of men supporting our work,
Right.
and a lot of men funding, or contributing to the Women's Fund. So there's a lot of change.
Yeah. As I used to say, even the men of Harvard have daughters. I mean,
And they have mothers too.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, another factor in this is that women live longer than men, and many times women inherit money, and they, state laws are set up many times so women will inherit a certain percentage of a man's, or whatever.
Yeah.
And some people don't have wills, and so the money will go to the surviving spouse in
Yeah.
some states. So women do need to recognize that they can handle money, and not only handle it, but give it away.
Apply it effectively.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, women are already in the majority of wealth now. Women hold the majority of wealth in the United States, something like 51% now, and it's increasing because of exactly those factors, that women live longer, and there's also this double inheritance of they inherit from their parents and they inherit from their spouse. So women's financial power is much stronger than it ever was, and it's going to be increasing. And you see that now. Banks and financial institutions are now starting to look at women differently, recognizing that they hold this power. And the education around estate planning and everything else is now often being geared towards women. It's a good thing to know.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you have a lot of money or not. You still want to know how to use your money effectively, no matter how much it is.
I think that it's those women who are fortunate enough to inherit from their parents and
Yeah.
to inherit when a spouse dies. That, of course, is not true for everybody.
Right.
And that's why the Women's Fund is extremely important.
Yeah.
Because, yes, you're geared so that women who have money will give it to help women.
Exactly.
But you're also geared to grab a hold of young women and women who really, they may be in poverty.
Mm-hmm. I think about a story when I was 19, my grandfather was an amateur stockbroker, and after retiring from his job, and he was very successful at it. And I asked him if he would teach me the stock business. And he said, "You don't need to learn this. Your husband's going to take care of that." And that did not sit well with me at age 19. But that was the prevailing thinking, that not only did I not need to know about money, but that someone was going to be taking care of that for me.
Someone's going to take care of you.
Right. And young women today, I think, know that they aren't necessarily going to be taken care of, but the paradigm of someone's going to take care of that for you is gone. And whether you have money or not, you need to know some of the basics of how you're going to live and how are you going to support yourself. And that we all look at people now, I mean, dual income families are a necessity in order to afford today's needs. So, economic independence is a very important tenet, regardless of how much money you have.
Right. And I think that women have had unique barriers,
Yeah.
if you will. Now, we've been talking about this. And one thing that we have single mothers, high divorce rate in our country. Mm-hmm. And many times the children will be with the mother after the divorce. And the income goes down.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that changed the story, the initiative took on right away when it formed 4 years ago, was doing research on women's economic status. That had not been done in the state of Vermont for over 10 years. And we'd had a recession and lots of other things that had happened in between. And the facts that came out of that, data is king. Data tells the story. And we had no data on women in Vermont until 2016. And we funded that because it was so important. And what came out then, and the new figure now, is that 39% of women working full-time in the state of Vermont cannot meet their basic needs. 39%.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. And the number of women in single-parent households with dependent children are 9 times more likely to live in poverty than they would if it's a dual-income family. So we've got so many women and dependent children at the epicenter of poverty in our state. And that's part of what our work is to do, is to not only highlight that, but to try and find programs to help that. And that, I'm happy to say, is also part of the goal of the Vermont Community Foundation, our umbrella parent, for lack of a better word, is trying to really think about that and how do we direct funding to help that.
Where would someone call for information about the Vermont Women's Fund? And I know you have a website.
Yes. Well, I would urge people to go to our website first, vermontwomensfund.org. And you can get all the information about reaching me or someone there on the website. And you can also make donations on the website online or inquire further about our programs. Everything's listed there.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Now, we've touched upon a fact that we won't talk about birth control and all those things because it's pretty obvious that women need to take more leadership roles in that. Mm-hmm. No question. But women spending their money perhaps a little bit differently. they have done studies in third world countries that if women are educated and they have a chance to have some money of their own, they tend to spend their money on the family.
Yep.
You know, nutrition. Maybe we'll go to a concert. You know, things like that. Going back to school, daycare. You know, they
Right.
spend their money differently.
Yeah. Again, I read a lot of statistics, and I try to retain them. One that has always stuck with me is 90% of a woman's paycheck goes directly back into the community in one form or other. And your examples are exactly right. So when women thrive economically, so do the communities in which they live.
Well, that's a very important stat, and
Yeah.
statistics are important.
Yeah.
Of course, you can use statistics any way you want to, but sometimes they really hold up. And I think the statistics on women and money and the problems they have, I think those are good stats,
Yeah,
actually.
they really tell a story.
Yep.
And you're right, our culture is changing. There are far more single parent households. There are more dependent children on an individual rather than a dual income family. It's changed the landscape, and we have to adapt with that. We're not going to go back to, you know, an older social construct.
No.
We have to figure out ways to make people have healthy and, you know,
We don't have a
profitable
lot of
lives.
time left here, but 25 years. You just have about a rip-roaring minute here, but you know, 25 years. That's a marvelous birthday, isn't it?
It
What
is.
what have you done?
Well, I'm very honored to be able to be a part of the organization at this 25-year mark. I think we've helped educate, and I'll just talk about in the last 3 years, I think we've really helped educate and be front and center with the issues of today that are so important to women, girls, boys, and men. We have a lot more men, as I said, interested in our organization and wanting to help. We're creating safe, women-friendly workplaces and policies to support that. And we are there now as a leader, whether it's with the governor or different, the private sector in particular, are looking to us for training on gender,
Right.
and how do they move forward and really ultimately help strengthen Vermont's economy.
Well, the Vermont Women's Fund is a good partner for women in our state to have. And keep up the good work. Congratulations on your 25 years, and have fun while you're doing a great job.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for coming,
much.
Meg.
Thank you, Kay.
Thanks for joining us on Conversations with Kay.